Good evening, everyone. Thank you guys so much for waiting. I was trying to make sure that I had everything set for this evening. Hey, Miss Arnetta. So glad you were able to join me again on day two. Um, I'm glad to see also that you're on YouTube, which means that I did something right tonight, which is good. I went in and I reset everything, so it should be totally fine. And we should be ready to go. So, just to give a brief introduction for those of you who don't know me, my name is Catherine Maldonado, and I'm the owner and curator of Sew Your Bag. And Sew Your Bag is a monthly subscription box geared towards anybody who's a beginner or aspiring bag maker. And I give you everything you need to make a bag. And so this box, or what I'm going over today, the Zambarau, is actually the March box. And everything that I'm using was in the box. So you may hear me reference when you received your kit or when you received your box. And that's because everything that I will be using today to make the bag is in the box. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to review with you a little bit about the exterior construction. And that way you'll know exactly what we're going to do. And then I'll talk about the things that you're going to be needing for tonight. So the other thing I want to mention is there will be some camera switching. So I will try to give you a heads up so it just doesn't come to you unaware. So let's look at the exterior of the bag. So the exterior of the bag is going to be everything on the outside along with the straps. And there are connectors right here on either side. So we will be constructing the strap, we will be constructing the body of the bag, and then on the reverse side, there is this slip pocket right here, and it does have a magnetic closure. So we will be constructing this slip pocket, which is also a zippered pocket on the back of the bag. So when we're done, we will have the entire back, front, sides, and flap constructed. We will not add in our straps at this point, but what we will do is we will base stitch in our side pieces right here once we're done in preparation for tomorrow evening, which will be the lining. Hey, Yvette. Hey, Della. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate it. So if you didn't join me last night, I will not be using this fabric. I'm going to be using a blue fabric, but the steps are exactly the same. So yesterday we did some preparation and I said to you to work on a couple of pieces so that when you came back today for the exterior, you would be ready. So let's talk about the exterior pieces. So this is the blue that I'm using tonight. I am using black waterproof canvas. So one of the pieces you're going to need, or a couple of pieces, of everything to construct your strap. You're also going to need this bottom piece, and I explained yesterday that this bottom piece, the way the bag is constructed, is we add our front and our back pieces. So we add these two pieces at the top, one at the top and one at the bottom. And then we will also be adding in our side pieces, which are these two pieces. And what I will mention is that yesterday when I left you on day one, is that I asked you to please interface these pieces. You will not be interfacing this piece, which is a waterproof canvas. All right, so this is going to be the main body of the bag as we construct it. You should also have already cut out the pocket pieces. So I have two for the exterior. Right, so there's two pieces and then there's two pieces for the lining. And just to give you another overview, that's because the back pocket, this would be like the front, and then the back pocket also has a piece of fabric right here. So that's why you need two pieces. Because I am using blue, I've already cut out my accent piece for my strap. I'm using cotton webbing. Cotton webbing is what came in the kit. And it should be about 60 inches. You can cut it down depending on your height. So I usually say anywhere between maybe 56, 54, and 60 inches long. You're going to need your number 3 zipper. And my hardware is going to be all blue. These are the side tabs. You will need triangles or D-rings. And we will also be installing our twist lock. Mine is blue. The kit came with purple, a magnetic closure, zipper tabs to attach to our number 3 zipper. We will use a tri-glide, or some of you may know this is a slider. And then, of course, you're going to need all the corresponding pieces. So there's a washer for the lock. There's washers for the magnetic closure. And then some kind of scrap piece of material just to reinforce the back of these prongs and the back of your magnet. So what you're going to be doing these is putting them on the inside along with your washer pieces. I'm using Decoville Heavy. You can use Decoville Light. Nancy mentioned yesterday that she saves the waterproof canvas corners and uses that. You can use a piece of vinyl, a piece of leather. So whatever it is you want to use, you'd use that to reinforce it. All right, so I've interfaced all of my pieces and they are ready to go. One thing I want to go over with you tonight is, which I didn't mention yesterday because I wanted to cover it all at one time when we're constructing it. So when you're making these pieces and you're putting everything together, it is going to be a drop-in lining. So because it is a drop-in lining, instead of having you wait till the bag is finished and then fold over the edge, what I actually do is I pre-fold and I iron the edge. So the folded part is going to be the top. If you have directional fabric, make sure that this fold is at the top. And an example of that is, this is going to be the back of my bag because it has a little symbol. I put the fold up here because I want this to be the top and this to be the bottom. If it was this way and I did the fold, then this would come out upside down. So let's talk about the folding part of it. So in this, for this pattern, I'm going to do a 1/2 inch fold. And all I simply do is, this is unfolded. I just grab my ruler, just like this. I draw a line. So I draw a line this way. That's 1 inch down. And for those of you who are saying, but I thought you said a 1/2 inch. I did. So I draw a line that's 1 inch down. Make sure that you use something that, one, is not going to bleed through to the front of your fabric. I like to use either a chalk liner, or this one happens to be a friction pen or Frisian pen, some people call it, and it's heat erasable. The one thing that you have to be aware of, though, because it is heat erasable, as you're folding this and ironing it, the steam starts to erase your line ahead of you. So once I've done this and I've drawn that line, and hopefully you can see it right there. It's 1 inch down. I then take the top raw edge here and I fold it down to that line, and then I iron it. So I do that for the front, the back. I did it as well for both of my sides. So it's a 1/2 inch fold. It just makes it so much easier when you're setting the bag into the lining. I then also, for the when we get to the lining tomorrow, I will do that fold again for the accent pieces going around the top. So that is the fold that you should have. And once you've done that and we put the bag together, you'll see why it's so helpful. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to construct the strap. So I'm going to grab my strap pieces, and the directions give you 2 different lengths. I cut my strap pieces the same length, and I'm just going to trim off the excess. But the way the strap will look when we're done is it will be this fabric, which I do not line, and I will lay that directly on top of my webbing, just like that. And for me, it's black, so the webbing will peek out on the side. So I'm not putting any kind of interface on here. I did mention if you wanted to reinforce it, you could use a light interfacing. The other thing I would recommend that you do is, so that you don't waste interfacing or anything like that, use up your scraps. Nobody's going to see it. And then just lay the interfacing down the middle. So you don't have to lay it on the exterior, just cut a strip that goes straight down the middle right here. And that should be sufficient if you want to stabilize it. So the way that I did the strap is it initially came out and it was one piece, just like this. I folded it over. I drew a line straight down the middle. And then what I did is I took one long raw edge, folded it to the middle, ironed it, the full length of my strap, and then took the other side, folded that to the middle, and then ironed that as well. So then I ended up with this bifold straight to the middle, just like that. All right, non-interface or anything, just like that. The next thing that you're going to do, and I pre-folded it. You can do it before, you can do this step before you fold it. For me, it just makes it easy if I pre-fold it. Is I want a very long strap, and this isn't going to be 60 because the fabric I think is 44. So I'm going to miter these two together. What I need to do is open this up completely. So I open one end completely, just like that. And I did cut off my selvage, by the way. And then I open the other one completely. And I will be placing these two pieces. This is the right side, and that's my right side. I will be placing them right sides together, just like that. And when we miter them, what we're going to do is we're going to go from one corner to the other corner and sew a diagonal line going across. So I'm just going to open that up, get it flat, get it straight. And we will be mitering from one end to the other. So what I do is I double check which direction I'm going to sew in by folding my strap. So if I take my strap, they're right sides together, right? The ends of one, end of the other over here. And then what I say is, well, if I draw a diagonal line from the very top to the very bottom, when I flip it over, it will look like that, which is what I want it to do. So I say this because depending on how you place this on the cutting mat, if you turn it around the other way, because somebody may be left-handed and it's like this, right? I don't want you to think, oh, I'm going to sew the diagonal line this way, because then what happens when you fold it over that way, it's not going to be mitered. It'll be at a 90-degree angle. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm putting one fabric piece to my left. The other one I'm putting perpendicular, right sides together. I will clip them in place just like this. And then I will sew a diagonal line. In my case, because my fabric piece is on the left, is I will sew a diagonal line from that top left where they intersect right here to right to the bottom over here where they intersect. So I'm going to draw a diagonal, sew a diagonal line. That way, when I flip it over this way at a 45-degree angle, it should be mitered together at an angle. So I hope that makes sense. So I'm just going to put another clip in here or clip this back together. And then I will go to the sewing machine. So I'm going to switch my camera and go to the sewing machine. Once again, upper left to lower right is how I'm stitching. I'm using a stitch length of 3. So we're going to go to the sewing machine. You can use 2, 2.5. It doesn't really matter. We're just sewing them together. I know sometimes there are people who are quilters and they're saying, why do you use 3? And I said, I don't know. I just like that. It's a wider stitch. You don't need a short stitch for handbags. So it's usually like a 3 or 3.5. I'm using a 3. I will back tack at the beginning up here and at the end down here. Making sure my sewing machine's on. It didn't go. And then what I'm going to do is once I've done that portion of it, I am going to just double check that I actually have this in the way that I want it. So I will take this before I cut anything. I will fold it along that diagonal this way and take a look. And it's exactly like I want it to be, right? It should be a straight, continuous strap. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut about 1/4 of an inch away from that diagonal. So you can grab your ruler if you want and measure it. Just put your 1/4 of an inch mark on your stitch line, or you could free cut it without, any concern. You can just come back and say, okay, this is about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to cut that off. So once I've done that, and I open this up, I will also cut, there's like little, I don't know if you can see the little dog ear sticking out there. I'll cut those pieces off as well, so that they're totally flush to the side of my strap. Now I like to open that seam up where it's mitered so that it's flat. So when I fold it, I get a nice flat fold. When I fold the sides in, it's nice and flat. So I'm just going to open this up. Try not to cut it, too small. Don't cut it like 1/8 of an inch. Cut it like about 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to iron this right open. It just folds better. All right. And then what I can do is I can fold this back and fold that back as well, so they meet in the middle, just like that. And then because I ironed it, I just re-iron it. When I ironed it, I opened it up. Okay. So now we're ready. So because I use cotton, if you use polyester webbing, you can use a lighter, and then you would just light it and you would melt it. Because this is cotton, what I did is I used fray check. So for anybody, I'm trying to find my fray check, but anybody doesn't know what a fray check is, that's what I used for this. And it dries clear. You can also put some glue on it, like Elmer's glue, but it's stiff. It's very stiff now, so it doesn't unravel. So what I will do is, because I want this to be a finished edge here, is I will open this up, and you can eyeball this, fold that under so that this is totally flat, and then fold it back to the middle. I do give you measurements in the instructions on what to do, but that's all I really do. I then take my webbing with that still folded. I do this, I fold it to the back, and it is folded to the back about 1 inch. Once again, you can iron it, and I'm just going to put a clip in it, just like that. Okay. And then I'm just going to put clips. Now you can use double-sided tape, absolutely. But I didn't give you guys double-sided tape in the box, so but you can definitely use double-sided tape to help this stick down. Now what you will find is, because I did not interface it, you may see some stretch in the fabric. So that's fine, because when we get to the other end, we can just cut it that much shorter. The key to, trying to not get too much stretch, of course, is to adjust, if it's possible on your sewing machine, adjust the pressure of your sewing foot. And I'm just going to clip that all the way down. So you can put as many or as few clips as you need. Once again, double-sided tape helps. I clip where I put one clip on one side, and then I come down a little bit ways and I put another clip. So I alternate in the way that I clip. And then when I get to the other end, I will do that fold again to give that nice, neat edge. Now, one thing I'm not going to worry about, and I'll tell you why, is I'm not going to worry on this side about whether or not I stitch across here. And that's because when I put my ring on, when I put this ring on here, like this, and I fold it over, you won't see that stitch across, and we are going to come back and stitch across it anyway. So all I have to make sure that I do is that I actually catch the sides of this. And if you've aligned it nicely, you will catch the sides. It doesn't have to be perfect, because like I said, you're not going to see the bottom. because we're going to fold it over both on both ends at some point. So whether it's around a D-ring or it's around our slide bar. I do sew 4 lines. So I sew both sides at 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. I go around the strap twice. So once at 1/4 of an inch and one at 1/8 of an inch. I used to do it where I did 1/4 of an inch first, the seam, and then came back. I mean, I did 1/8 of an inch and then came back and did the 1/4 of an inch. And what I found is when I did that, sometimes the fabric in the middle would buckle. Whereas if you do it 1/4 of an inch, right, it's totally flat. And then you could come back and do the 1/8 of an inch, and you shouldn't see that buckle. So if you're somebody who sews 2 lines of stitching like that, try it out. When it says do an 1/8 and 1/4, try doing the 1/4 first and then coming back and doing the 1/8. And take a look. You can even test it out on a little wristlet. All right, so I'm getting to this end. I had like 88. It was my stitch length. I mean my strap length, because I cut it both of them at the same width of fabric. So I'm just going to cut on this end. I'm just going to cut off a piece. When I get to there, I'll trim it again. But remember, I have to, at this end, I will have to open this up and fold it under like this, and then fold it back. All right, so I'll have to do that. Do this. So it gives a nice, neat finish. And then do this. I know you're not going to see it, but it's something about, it makes me feel like it's actually finished. And then I'll do this and I will clip it in place so that both ends will have that nice fold over, and then underneath it's nicely folded over. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch. And now this is a top stitch. So I'm going to stitch with a top stitch length of 4.0, between 4.0 and 5. 4.0 and 4.5, I should say, all the way around. First stitch is going to be at 1/4 of an inch. So it's going to be on the exterior fabric at 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Then I'm going to come back and do it at 1/8 of an inch, still on the exterior fabric all the way around. So let's go to the sewing machine. All right, I never start at the bottom corner. So I never start like right here or along the bottom. I normally start on the side about 1/2 an inch up. So I make sure that my presser foot is on there completely. And I cut this strap kind of wonky. I don't know how I did that, but um, just do a little adjustment here on this, but I can see that for some reason it's narrow in one spot. And we'll try to fool the eye a little bit. Okay. So I'm actually using the edge of my presser foot. If you don't want to, if you don't know, my plate doesn't have 1/4 of an inch, but I know that for me, my presser foot, the edge of it is 1/4 of an inch. And I know somebody said depends on the machine. It could be 3/8 of an inch. So doesn't matter as long as you're consistent. So I'm going to stitch down, change my stitch length, and I will be back tacking. And this is where the double-sided tape actually helps, because you don't get as much shifting around. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, I'm coming to the other end. Once again, didn't get that much stretch on here, but like I said, it depends on the pressure of your presser foot against your fabric. So you want to make sure that it's not pressing down too hard and your fabric is gliding through there. But given that it's not interfaced, that was what would create some stretch. So when I get to about 1/4 of an inch from the bottom here, I'm going to stop. Now, this is a tip I give every time I do this. What you want to make sure that you do is don't lift your presser foot quite yet. Make sure your needle is in the down position, and then you're going to rotate your needle so that it starts going up. Once you see it start going up, you know that it has caught the bobbin thread, and therefore you're ready to pivot. If it's not going up, sometimes it doesn't catch that bobbin thread, and you will get a little bit of a jogging. So now I will lift my presser foot. The needle is still in there. Rotate it. It's 1/4 of an inch from the end, from over here, and then I will lower it. Okay. I will stitch across the bottom here until I get about 1/4 of an inch from this end. So you can see right here, I can actually lift this up. There's a nice big fold. But when I come back with the 1/8 of an inch, that's what will lock it in. So I'm going to go across till I'm about 1/4 of an inch. Once again, rotate your hand wheel till it goes up. Lift the presser foot, rotate, and then drop it down. And then just come back the other side. Okay, once again, when I get to this bottom, 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, make sure to stop with the needle in the down position. Rotate your hand wheel. Lift your presser foot and rotate. Now, if you're not quite there, like when I rotated, I wasn't quite there, so I can lower it. Take one more stitch. Make sure it's still going up, lift and rotate, and I'm right there. If for whatever reason you don't get close enough, you can always shorten your stitch length. So right now mine is at a 4. I could lower it to about a 2, take 1 or 2 stitches, and then put it back up to the 4 just so that I get to exactly where I need it to be. So now I'm going to go back across to 1/4 of an inch over here. I actually counted my stitches before, so needle should be going up, lift, lower, and then match the 2 stitches if you can. So you want to make sure you get back into those same holes, and you're going to back tack. So I want to take a moment here to show you what I was telling you about the corner. So hopefully you'll be able to see this. So the reason that I rotate the wheel is you can see right here, there's a straight line. Sometimes what happens when you get to that corner and the needle is not quite, it hasn't quite gone all the way down and started to come up, what'll happen is you'll get an angular stitch that goes like this. And that's because you did not catch the bobbin stitch. So that's why I tell you when you get to the corner here, to make sure you rotate your hand wheel and the needle is going back up in the opposite direction so you know that you got your bobbin, and then you can go back across. Okay, so I just want to take a moment and show you that. So now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to stitch our 1/4 of an inch, I'm sorry, our 1/8 of an inch seam, and we're going to do the same thing. So I start once again 1/2 an inch up on one of the sides. It doesn't really matter. For me, my 1/8 of an inch is the inside of my presser foot. So it's right in here along that edge is my 1/8 of an inch. Some of you may even have a machine that you can actually move your needle. This one doesn't, it's fixed. And I'm just going to start sewing, and I'll sew that all the way around, 1/8 of an inch, same stitch length. So I'm not changing anything on the stitch length. I will back tack. And just so that you know, when I'm looking at my sewing, because I know I'm going kind of fast, I am not looking at the needle go up and down, but I'm looking like over here. And the reason that I hold my hands here is because it helps me to be able to, if I needed to, shift the strap in any one direction, but ever so slightly. So it also helps to keep the strap going straight. So go as fast or as slow as you need to go. But that's kind of what I'm doing when I'm sewing the strap. Now, when you get to the other end, remember it's an 1/8 of an inch, not a 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to come down 1/8 of an inch, rotate my hand wheel, pivot my material or my strap, come to the other side an 1/8 of an inch away. I need one more stitch. Oops. Not really what I intended, but I'll back tack here. And my machine actually, if I use my heel, it cuts the thread. So that was that click that you heard. Once again, an 1/8 of an inch, not a 1/4 of an inch. And I'm just going to match the two threads best as you can. You're not going to see it. It'll be underneath your strap. And then I am done. So I now have my strap sewn together and with my webbing attached to the back. So I'm just going to cut off these threads. And then what we're going to do is we're going to prep it, but we're not going to actually sew it into the bag yet. But I will prep it so then the final step will be to add the strap and to add your zipper end. All right, so that's going to be my strap. It's kind of hard to see, but I use blue thread. You see that on the back? If you wanted to, and I wanted the blue thread, but if you wanted to, because this is black, you could use black thread. Make sure your threads are the same weight, right? So what's in the top that you're using and the bobbin thread are the same weight. Just save yourself some heartache. So I'm going to take my slide bar or my slider, my tri-glide. I'm going to hold it like this. First, I'm going to slide it up in one side and down the other side. That's all I'm going to do. So I'm going to slide it up on one side, and this is 1 inch. It goes up, and then I'm going to put it right over that bar and come down. So just like this. Then I'm going to pull it through, and that's going to be about, I think I have it through here, about maybe 1.5 inches. Let's see how good I am. Yep, 1.5 inches. So you can do however much room you need. You can even do it this long if you want. You just need to give yourself enough room because we're going to stitch this and we want to make sure that we're not so close that we scratch up our hardware. I do not stitch a box. I'm just going to stitch 2 lines, one at 1/4 of an inch and one at 1/8 of an inch across, and I will be back tacking. Okay. So I'm just going to add a clip here, and this is all we're going to do for our strap, and then we're going to set it aside. And that's because the rest of it we're going to need to do once we have completed the bag, and I don't want the strap in the way. So I clip it. Let's go back to the sewing machine. So I'm going to try to grab here my bobbin thread. And I'm actually going to hold them. So I got a pretty good length here, and I'm going to hold them because I don't want to get, I guess what they refer to as nesting, which means I get a whole bunch of thread on this side. And I'm sewing it from the underside because I want to be able to see where the edge of this is. I don't want to guess. So edge of my presser foot is here. It's a distance away, about 1/4 of an inch from my tri-glide. And I'm just going to stitch. Pretty much you should be stitching over that same line, that short line that you stitched. And I will be back tacking. I'm going to hold on to my thread. And I will be back tacking. I'm going to go forward, and then I'm going to go back. I do go over the edge, so I go outside of it to get a wrap on the thread. I know not everybody does that, but I do. And I go over the edge on this side, and then I go back tack. Okay. So that's one. And then I have to do another one. And I'll show this to you when I get back. I have to do one at 1/8 of an inch. So I just want to make sure that I get that bobbin thread comes up. So I'm going to get a little bit more bobbin thread so I can grab it at the bottom. It's always the tricky part because my machine cuts it so short. Cuts it really short on the back there. So easiest way to do it is to take it out and put it back in, pull some thread out, and then just put it back in. And then that should work. Okay. And I'll show you what I mean when I refer to the nesting. So usually I don't worry about it, but because I'm sewing it on the top, I want it to be pretty on the bottom. So I'm just grabbing my threads here, those other long threads, grabbing them. And I'm going to do 1/4 of an inch. You can do 3/8 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. Whatever you want to do, you can do. You know, I'm just, I don't know, creature habit. I like being consistent. Just want to make sure I grab my threads, and I will be back tacking. Once again, I do go over the edge. Okay. And I'll show you what I did. So I will cut this, but hopefully you'll be able to see if I didn't mess it up. I just want to get the thread out of there. So these were my extra threads that I had here when I made them extra long. And I will show you what I was talking about. So I'm going to cut these real quick. Let me just cut these right off. Clean this up. And I will try to show you. But right here, if I didn't hold those threads, I would have had a whole bunch of threads spiraling here. What I'm going to do is take, this is polyester thread, so I will take a lighter and I will singe them shorter. So give me 1 second to find my lighter. And I'll probably find it when I'm not looking for it. But polyester thread, you can actually just if you catch the edge of the thread here, you can singe them and they'll actually curl in and melt on themselves. Don't light the whole thing on fire, just a little bit. And I usually use a lighter to do that, but can't seem to put my hands on it right now. Okay. And anyway, that's how you clean that up. So I'll come back later on and I'll clean that up. If you have little snips, that'll work too. Okay. So you can see right there. All right. I'm going to come back later on just to give you an idea. I will put on my ring, and this ring will be attached to something, and then I'll slide this up and over to make an adjustable strap. But for right now, I'm going to leave it just the way it is. I'm not going to do anything extra to it, and I'm going to set it aside. The next thing we need to do is make our little tabs to attach this to and to attach it to the bag. So I will do that right now as well. And I'm just wrapping this up because if I don't wrap it up, I'll lose it. And I'll be like, where's my strap? So. If anybody's wondering what that clanking is, I have and I can't show, but I have a husky desk. Yes, husky like the dog. And it's a workshop kind of desk. And it has 2 drawers. So it's really me sliding the drawers in and out. It's 2 feet long. So that's what you hear me doing. So let's grab our tabs. And these are our little tabs. For these, I did interface them because I did want reinforcement on my straps. Remember, your straps are going to be something that's going to bear the weight of your bag. So you want to make sure that they are reinforced. I used DLH 2010 to interface it. So it's in the directions. Drew a line down the middle, pretty much the same thing I did with the strap, except this is interfaced. And then I folded one end to the middle and then the other end to the middle, and I ironed them. I know that I can see this, but when you put this onto your ring, your D-ring or your square ring, and you fold it in half like this, you're not going to see that seam because they were then going to sew across here and you can't see that seam in the middle. So don't worry about that. I will, though, take it to this sewing machine and I will sew along the long sides, along folded edges, 2 rows of stitches like I did with the straps. I won't go around. I'll just do 1 1/4 and 1 1/8 on both sides for both of these tabs. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. I'm still using the same stitch length of a 4, and I will back tack. Now, instead of cutting my thread and doing the next one, I'm just going to take the second one, which is this one, nest it right in there just like that, and I will continue sewing. Make sure to back tack. When I get to the other end, I'm just going to simply cut the other one loose. So I'm just cutting this little thread between them. Flip it over to the side that I didn't sew, and once again, do 1/4 inch. Cut that one off. And then after I sew this one, we will be ready for our 1/8 inch. So now we're ready for the 1/8 inch. And usually if you have several of these, you can actually, because if it's like 5 or 6 of them, you can wrap them back around without cutting it because it becomes so long. And we're almost done. And we have 2 more. This is 1. And then we just have this one to do the last 1/8 inch. Now what I will do is I will add those little rings and I will baste them at the bottom just to hold them together. So grabbing my ring, one ring, just clean up some of these threads a little bit first. Grab one of my rings. This one is kind of like it's not welded, so it's not smooth and there's a split. So I'm going to make sure that the split sits inside here so that there's no a gap up there. I will fold it in half like this. I will add a clip and I will do the same to the other one. You'll also find that I baste a lot. And that's because I have done things in the past where I didn't catch all the pieces. Once again, there's a split. I put that against the wrong side of this, which is where the seam is, fold it in half just like that, and I clip it. All right. Now I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm just going to baste across that. I'm going to use the same stitch length of 4. I normally baste with the 6, but I'll leave it at 4 at either 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, whichever one you're comfortable with, because you're not going to see this because there's going to be about a 1/2 inch seam here when I tuck it into the bag. So it's just to keep the both of them together so that you don't, accidentally leave one behind when you're doing things. So I will back tack beginning and the end. And then I can just take my other piece. I'm just going to turn it the opposite way though. And I will stitch that as well. And that's it. So we have those done. We have our strap done. All right, for anybody who's following along, let me just tell you where we are in the instructions. Okay, we're on page 13. So if anybody's following along, I'm on page 13 at the bottom, and we're going to start sewing our flap. So you will need, you will need your foam for your flap. You will need your lining or waterproof canvas, and then you will also need your exterior fabric. We will be cutting a hole in this, so when we get to that, we'll maybe do a little bit of holding our breath. Once again, this is interfaced. We're not interfacing the waterproof canvas. I like to baste my my foam to my fabric and then come back later on and just sew everything together. So what I'm going to do is turn this over, line everything up, line it along the bottom. The top here should be a 1/2 inch shorter, and that's because there will be a fold. Before I move on, let me just add that fold in here. So once again, I'm going to take my ruler, draw a line that's 1 inch. Grab my iron and let's fold it under. So this is the erasable pen. I don't know if you can see that. You see that? So now when I fold this over, I'm just going to iron it to that line. I fold it to the line and then I just iron it. The other thing that happens is if you iron and then you draw a line and then you put another piece of fabric, you may find that that line disappears because the ironing board itself is hot. So I'll just show you a little something. So now if you look at my piece, you can see the line had disappeared, but I only sewed up to here and it's starting to disappear over there. All right. So you want to make sure when you're doing this that if you kind of have to work a little bit quickly, or make sure that you put your piece in a cool part of your iron on your ironing board, because if you're doing a lot of ironing, the board gets hot, and therefore when you put it down with the line, it also will start disappearing. So all right, so now I can take my foam, lay it right on here. This is sew-in foam, so we will be sewing it in. I'm just going to clip it. I stitch it from the front. You can stitch it from the back side. I stitch it from the front. Usually what I will do is I will cut a piece of foam larger than what I need, stitch it down, and then cut the foam. And on the pattern pieces, it actually tells you how big to cut this so that you know you have enough foam. So that's what it'll look like, the foam's on the back. I'm going to stitch it on the front. I'm going to stitch down the side here to catch my foam down around the bottom. I am using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I will increase the stitch length to a 6. You could do a 4, but I do that just so that I'm not wasting time sewing. So, all right, and I'm just going to go around the whole thing. 1/8 of an inch is because then you don't have to rip it out, right? It's within the seam allowance. I do back tack, by the way. I'm not worried about that sharp corner, so I just go around it. This also helps you when you're putting it together, the pieces together, so that the foam doesn't roll. Because that could happen, then you have to poke it down there because you left it behind. All right. So now that's the exterior, that's the foam. Laying my exterior right side up, taking my lining piece, laying that on there right side down, so they're right sides together. Line up the ends, the sides and the top, and then we're going to clip it in place. We will be leaving the top here open, so we'll just sew down the sides, down and around the bottom, back up, and the diagonal side again. So we just want to leave the top open because that's where we're actually going to turn it through. And what's going to happen is when we stick it into our bag, that will get closed because it'll get closed in the seam. So we're not going to close it. We're just going to stick it in the bag unfinished like that. So it doesn't really matter. Well, I shouldn't say that. It does matter. I tried to put the smoothest piece of fabric against my sewing bed. So this is kind of like plasticky. So I don't want that to stick to the bed of my machine. So I will sew from the waterproof canvas side. And then this foam is very smooth, so it'll glide better. So that's what I do. So just try to find the smoothest side of your fabric, whether it's the lining or the exterior, whichever one's smoothest, put that on your bed so that it'll glide. And I will back tack at the start and the stop. I will also, while I'm doing this, make sure that I do get that kind of sharp corner, and I will show you that as well. Okay, it's clipped in place. Wrong side, wrong side. So they're right sides together. I'm going to start at the top here. Remember, you're leaving this piece open. Start at the top, come down here. I will be pivoting. So I will raise my presser foot to try to get a little sharp corner there, come down, around, and back up to the top over here. Back tack, start and stop. This will be at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm going to turn my stitch length down to 3. When I get to that corner, rotate your wheel so that it's going up. I'm going to lift it and pivot it so I can go on the straightaway. Now, when you come to the corner, you have a couple of choices. You can take smaller stitches, right? So you can take little time, you can change your stitch length. I just take my time because I find that a 3 works very well. And I just take my time and I just really gently pull my fabric and rotate it as I go around. What I try to do is the edge of my presser foot, which is right here, I try to make sure that that stays along the edge of this as I rotate. So, and when I do that, it gives me a curve. So you may notice on the opposite side, there seems to be a little bit extra fabric, and there will be, but just keep the edge of this aligned with the edge of this, and you'll find that you get a nice curve as well. Just take your time as you're rotating it. Once again, I'm going to pivot over here, but I want to make sure I get to the corner. Needle is down, rotate my hand wheel, lift the presser foot, and then rotate the piece at that slight angle, and then stitch all the way to the end and back tack. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do, and it's all stitched in there nice. Remember, top here should be open because that's what we're going to turn through. I'm actually going to snip these corners. I don't really do too much fancy. What you can, there are a number of ways you can do this. So you can take your corner here because there's a lot of bulk and you want it to be smooth, and you can cut it to about a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch. So you can do it like this, and I'm trimming it down. So hopefully you'll see it drop on the, right? And you can do the same here if you want. The other thing you can do is you can snip it with the point of your scissors. So if your scissors are sharp, you just have to be careful not to cut the thread, right? So sometimes they're sharp, but then you end up cutting the thread. But I don't know if you can see that. You see that, how that's snipped right there. Okay, so that's little snips. The other thing you can do is, because there's foam in here, you can actually pull back on your waterproof canvas. And if you have applique scissors, which are, they're kind of like embroidery scissors, they're called duckbill, you can also go around that way and cut off either the foam or the waterproof canvas. A couple of ways to thin it, but I want to thin that corner. And sometimes I do a combination of both. So sometimes I thin it and I also snip it. Some people will fold it like this and take little snips. I'll do it on the side. You don't have to do the side, but I'll show you. And they'll take a little snip. And I don't know if you can see that angular piece, but they'll do that as well. Okay. I will thin this corner here. So I normally just cut it flush, just like that. And I cut this flush as well. So I take about a 45-degree angular cut on that corner. So that looks kind of good. I'm going to stick my hand in here and I'm going to turn it right side out. Starting at a corner, I just push in here, open it up, and it is waterproof canvas, so it may be a little stiff for you. You can hit it with a blow dryer or some steam to soften it up. And then we're going to turn it right side out, just like that. Poke all your corners out, and crochet hook, knitting needle, purple thing, you know, anything you need. Just poke it out, fingertips, just poke them right out. And remember, this should be curved. So you can see that's not really curved, it's flat. So you want to make sure you push it out so that it's totally, it should be curved when you're done. And this is why you also come in here and you thin it out on the corner, because it helps it to lie flatter. I'm going to just roll it through in my fingertips a little bit, and I'm going to do the same to the other side as well. There's also here a corner, because remember you had that little turn, so it should be a slight angle over here on the side, as well as the other side. So you want to make sure you poke those out also. All right. And I'm just rolling it through my fingers. So when you're done, it'll look like that. All right, so there should be an angle here. There should be a gentle curve over here. And that is going to be your flap. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch this closed. So I want to stitch that closed because it doesn't need to be open to put in the twist lock. And what we're going to do is once we've done that, we're going to create the opening for our little twist lock here on our piece. Okay. So I'm going to sew this closed. I'm going to top stitch going around the outside of this, which is what keeps it flat. I'll show you. Okay. So I top stitched around the outside of this. You can use 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And because I'm using 1/8 of an inch, I can use the same stitch length and stitch across the top. So go back to our sewing machine and do that. Make sure you poke everything out. I am starting at the top edge, 1/8 of an inch. Stitch length is at a 4, which is our top stitch, 4 or 4.5. I am going to stitch across first, close that up. And then when I get to about 1/8 of an inch here, that's when I'm going to pivot. Once again, make sure your needle's in the up position. You can then pivot and start sewing. I just needed one more stitch. Okay. And take your time. Now, before I get to this corner, I'll tell you, you have two options. One is to, because it's not very sharp, you can just gently follow the curve, or two, you can make it a sharp, so you could stop, lift your presser foot, and then put it at a definite angle. So I could lift my presser foot, do it this way. So it's at a definite angle when I get here, or you can do a gentle curve. I do the gentle curve because I like both sides to look exactly the same, and I'm a little type A. And if I don't hit this on the same on both ends, it drives me crazy. So I do a gentle curve. You can do either one. Okay. Machine needs to be oiled. It's very loud. All right, so that's our flap. So we have our flap completed. Oops. And the next thing we're going to do is we will be installing our little lock. So I'm going to very quickly, give me 1 second, let's see if I have another lock here. So let's see if I have another one. Of course I don't. Okay. So I'm going to take my lock, which is this piece here, and it has two pieces, and what's holding it together are these little tiny screws. So hopefully you can see those screws on either side. I will now take out those screws, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to rest them on a piece of lint roller paper. So make sure you have a dish or something so they don't roll away. So I'm going to use a piece of lint roller paper here. And I'm going to get my little screwdriver. And I'm going to remove those screws. Now, you will need to cut a hole, this inner hole, not the outer hole. So you'll need to draw a couple of things. And I like using the plate, the bottom plate, as my guide. So now you have two pieces here. You have two pieces, right? So I will use this bottom plate as my guide because I'll also need to cut the little circle here for my screw to go in. You can use a punch. So if you have a punch, you can use that, a leather punch. Mine is downstairs. But you can use your leather punch here and snip it. I'm going to do this all with a scissor. You can also buy one of these little kits, which is usually what I will use. And I'll put the link of where you can get it on Amazon. And you can also use one of these. And all you simply do is you need to find this one's square. They're all like different shapes in here. So I don't know if you can see, like this one's like a little teardrop shape, all different sizes and shapes. This one is a rectangle. So this one I use a lot because there's stuff in it. But you're going to find one that matches that opening. And this one looks like it's perfect, right? Because it matches that opening right there. So if you buy the kit, and a lot of these I haven't used, but this one I use a lot apparently. But you find one that's close to it where it's not going over. I'm going to cut this with a scissor because I'm going to assume that you may not have one of these kits. These are on Amazon. I will definitely put the link in the bio. There is a sharp side to this as well. So that which shiny is sharp. So when you put it on your piece, you'll hit the top of this with a mallet, or I use a hammer. I know they say you shouldn't, but I use a hammer. The kit is cheap enough, but this is the sharp side. And then you hit it. Make sure that you put it on something that is like, I have an old plastic cutting mat. If you do it on your own cutting mat like this, even though it's self-healing, it will create a rectangle if you hit it too hard. So that's why I use an old cheap plastic cutting mat or cutting board that I got from the dollar store. So I won't use this. So I'll show you how I do it freehand, as if I didn't have that. Okay. So in the directions, it tells you how high up this needs to go. I'm just going to center it here for myself so I know exactly where the center is. So I'm just off camera. I'm folding it in half on the edge here. All right. On the edge here, if you want to take a snip, or you could use a chalk liner, or you can use a silver pen, whatever you want to use. And you're going to mark the center. Now you can't do this on the bottom, by the way, because there's a seam down there. You're cut into your work. I'm just doing this in the top. And the top is what's going to get sewn into the bag. Now, when I do this, I'm going to align the center snip of this with one of my lines on my cutting mat. And I'm doing that so that I know exactly where it is. And then I'm going to align the bottom and make sure you have it centered. So that's very important because you don't want your lock, you don't want your lock to come out crooked. Let's put that on there. Okay. So now that I have this on there, I can see pretty much it's centered. I'm looking at it left to right. So if you're wondering what I'm looking at it left to right this way. All right. I'm then going to take my plate, and I'm taking this one, which is the flat one here. I'm going to grab my ruler, and in the directions, I tell you how high up to put this. So, and it's going to go up from the bottom here. Okay. So from this bottom edge, I'm going to measure up and center. Now, just so that you know, my center line, which I cut, which was right here. All right, that was my center. I put that center on a line. So I put it right there on that line. That's the center mark. I then know that same line coming down is the center down here. And I'm looking on either side over here just to make sure it's even, right? So I want to make sure these both fall at the same point. I'm then going to take my plate. I'm going to measure up on my piece at the bottom, and I'm going to draw a line. So I'm going to use this chalk liner because I can see that. I'm not sure if you guys can, but I can see that. All right, so there's a line that I drew. See that chalk line? Okay. What I will do before I do anything else, and this is a lot of measuring just to make sure that you are where you need to be. That's the line. You're then going to take your plate. So that's this plate here. And you're going to place your plate with the bottom edge at the bottom of this on the center line. A lot of directions. So I'm just going to, yep. So the way that I know that this is centered is I then remeasure from one end to the other. So I take this, I measure this way, make sure that that vertical edge of the plate is aligned. So I know what that measurement is. I'm holding the plate and I'm going to do the same thing. So now I know it's centered. Great. Totally centered. Now for this part, I'm going to take a pen, and I'm actually going to take a permanent pen because this part I'm going to cut out. So I need to draw a square inside this plate. So I'm going to draw a square right inside the plate, and I'm just going to fill it in. So I'm using a purple pen. And then I'm going to draw, there's 2 circles on the side here. I'm going to fill in those circles as well. And I'll show you when I'm done. Okay. So hopefully get the right angle for you. This is the square right here. And then there's a circle on this side and there's a circle on that side. Those markings match my plate where the circle and the opening is. Okay. Next, what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to cut out that opening. Now you can do it with a pair of scissors. So let me get my trusty scissors, my sharp ones. Okay. And when I cut it, I actually fold it in half, just like this. I'm not going to cut all the way from end to end. I'm just going to snip it right down the middle of that square because I just want to start the opening. And it is foam, so make sure you press it because it is foam in there. And I just take a snip in the middle. The reason I don't cut to the end is sometimes what happens is you do not have it totally centered. The bottom piece may be shorter than the top, but if you just take a snip, you can then open it up, stick your scissor in there, and then cut out that rectangle. So I do it in layers. So I will cut the fabric first, and then I will cut the waterproof canvas. So the fabric and the foam first. And I'm just going around and cutting out that square. You can also use an X-Acto knife or a craft knife if you want to cut it out. But I want you to see I cut out the square. All right, so now when I cut that out, you can see my foam. Okay, there's still a little slit in there because I cut the slit straight through. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to cut my foam. And I now know where the edges are, so I can cut the foam out. Just like that. Now I will tell you to use fray check on the front fabric so it doesn't fray, especially because this is a lock here. So I would advise you to use fray check on the cotton fabric. And just take your time with this. I'm just pulling that up. So now it looks black again, right? So that black that's in there is actually my waterproof canvas on the back. So I'm just going to fold this in half because I didn't quite snip it straight through to that. So I'm just going to cut that, a little hole in that. And then I'll stick my scissor in and I'll do the same thing for the waterproof canvas. So when I'm done, I should have cut a hole. Now, it's okay if you cut it smaller. It's probably preferable you cut it smaller and then come back later on and clean it up to cut it bigger. You can't uncut it if it's too big. So just something to be aware of. And try to keep it flat the whole time because you don't want to distort it in any way so that when you're cutting it, you distorted it and then you cut too much. Doesn't have to be neat. Okay, so now I can see the back. So I can see my opening. I'm just sitting in line with my opening. So once again, I'm just going to grab my little utility knife here. And I'm just going to cut that out. You can do it with a scissor. I would get a little pointy scissor. I just don't want to keep you guys hanging on the thread while I cut this out. So I'm just going to make it very quick. Okay. So once we've cut that out, I'll get this. Once we've cut the whole thing out, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to dry fit it. But remember, we have those circles on the end. So the way that I deal with the circles when I'm cutting it by hand is I cut a slit. So those circles tell me over here and over here. I just take my scissor and I cut kind of like a V shape there. So I cut at an angle to that circle. I don't cut over the circle. I just cut to the circle. And what I'm doing is I'm more or less cutting out a notch, and I'll show you why. And if you do that and then just keep cutting in the middle, it'll fall out. So I'm just snipping in the same spot over and over again. And I'll show you why I'm doing that. Because the front plate, which is this, turn it angle, has these two little bumps here. And that's what you have to fit this in when you stick it in there like that. So that's why when I cut it, I don't cut like a circle. You can use a punch. Even the kit that I showed you earlier has little circular pieces. But what happens is I find that, it's a lot of explaining, there's not really a lot of room between the screw hole and the edge over here. So if you cut too much, then you're outside of it. So I just cut to the little circle. And then I can always go back and clean it up later if I have to. But I know that I haven't overcut. All right. So if there's anybody who uses twist locks, tell me, what do you do? So now you can see, I don't know if you can see right there, there's a little slit. I know I actually use my punch, but I'm not going to do that tonight. All right, so once you've done that, I think I pretty much got it. I'm just going to, play with it a little bit more, keep cutting. And then once it's done, you're going to take your top plate, not your bottom plate. And I have little slits over here on the side. I'm going to push this, and I start it once. I push it this way, start at one side, and then I start at the other side. I'm going to grab a piece of foam to put down on my cutting surface so that I don't scratch up that plate. Okay. So I'm going to push one way, push the other way. The hole is in there. If it needs to be made bigger, like I'm looking at it going, oh, maybe I need to make it a little bit bigger on the top. Once again, you can come back. Like I said, you can make it bigger. You can't make it smaller. So just take your time and cut that out. And I am staying to the top of my horizontal line. So I'm not going to try to cut down towards the bottom. I'm more going to cut off at the top because I want the placement to be exactly where I said I wanted it to be. And you can see your line. I actually didn't cut to my line, which is why it's kind of snug in there. Okay. Once again, cut a V. Great. Take my plate, stick it in there, and it's getting a lot better. See that? So then what I'll do is I'll turn it over like this. And I'm going to try to take a look. And I want to make sure that I get that screw hole that's right here so that I can see it. I can't lift it up to show you, but there is a screw hole right here. And that's really what I want to expose on both sides, because I need to make sure that I can get that plate, that screw into those little holes. But you can't have the fabric in the way. So, like I said, just cut to the circle. Don't cut beyond the circle. If you cut a V, like you cut a V like this, and you just keep snipping inside that V, it'll break away the fabric. All right, I think we're almost there. All right. And then I'm just going to push this out of the way all the way around. So I am using an awl to do this. And I can see, when you pull it down, you can see exactly where you need to cut. I don't worry about it. If it means that I have bulk of the fabric, I don't really worry about that as much as I worry about exposing it. Because if there's bulk, you can always push the bulk out of the way. I just want to make sure that I have those little openings open where I can stick my screws through. So this one needs to be cut a little bit more because I didn't get to the line. If anybody thinks this is easy, I'm not leaning over it. Yeah, I was looking for, but I brought up another piece. I was looking for another one. I'm actually gonna, I did this in blue because I wanted to keep it. I'll be honest. I wanted a blue bag because I don't have a blue bag. And I wanted something that I can carry with jeans. So with blue jeans. So I don't wear those too often, but when I do, my bags that I have don't quite go. I always have to worry what top I'm wearing, and I'm matching it to the top instead of the jeans, but this way. So, okay, almost there. Almost there, guys. So, like this. And what's nice is it'll be pretty on the bottom side because this is black, so it'll really stand out. For those of you who got the kit, it's purple, and you still see it, but you know, this bright color against this black, it'll be really pretty. Okay. I think I got it, guys. All right, so let's lay this down. Let's put our little twist lock on here, the plate. Yep, I have enough room on either side. I can see that right here. And I'm going to start screwing it in. So I'm going to start on one side, halfway. I screw halfway, and then I do the other side, and then I come back and I lock everything together. So this side is open. That side is open. Take my plate. I'm going to screw on one side, and then I will adjust or push this material out of the way and then screw in the other side. So I grab my screws. I will say to you, if you have Loctite, you can stick that in there. I know some other people who actually use glue. So they'll use a little squeeze bottle, a little glue, just to keep the screws in there. When I use Loctite, I actually put it on something like a tissue paper, and then I screw them in. So let's put this in here, and I'm going to screw that right into that hole. Maybe I'll screw it into the hole. Hold on. Please hold. Okay, there we go. All right. There we go. I don't want to move my hand because I have it just what I think is perfect right where it is. And I'm just going to screw. So I moved my hand. Okay. There we go. All right. There we go. You can hear it. Okay, so it's on there, right? It's on there partially. I don't know if you can see me. I'm moving it. Hope it doesn't come out. But that's it. It's partially on there. So now I'm going to screw the other side. And I grab my awl. And I'm just moving this stuff out of the way. You can cut it out of the way as well, by the way. And I'm going to swing this around. And then before I screw it completely down, I'm going to use my awl to move all of that material between the plates. So yes, this is a little bit tricky, but you can do it. So I'm going to screw this partially the way down, not the whole way down. And then the other thing I will do is I will turn it to the front. You see it? And I will twist it a little bit. But this was my line down here that I drew. I want this to be totally even. So I twisted it so that it's straight. Right? Because I cut out enough material that I could get it on there straight. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my awl and I'm going to poke in. I'm just going right around, poking in all of that material between the plates. So I'm just going to go right around. And I just want to get rid of it so that I do not see it. And it'll go in. An awl is a very handy tool to have. So if you don't have one, you can pick them up inexpensively on Amazon. I ordered like 3 of them. And then I'm going to screw a little bit more, come back around again. And like I said, I'm just trying to get rid of all of this extra fabric, and you can just shove it into itself, into the bag itself, and it'll go. You can use a small scissor. I would not say to use an X-Acto knife because you will scratch your hardware. But the awl is very nice because you can get it into the plates, between the plates and the fabric, and you can shove it in there. I have this one piece of fabric that's sitting right here that's annoying me. It's almost done. So it's getting there. So this is probably the longest that I will take, because the other half is so much easier because it's just prongs. The other thing, that's what was nice about the push together ones that we did for the Macoba. We didn't have to worry about the screws. So when we cut the opening, there were just 2 pieces that fit together. And I will show you this in a minute. I think I've got it all in there. All right. So now I'm going to screw it all the way down the entire way to lock it in. So I just screw it till it stops. Once again, even though it's in there, you can give it a little twist, make sure it's straight. I still have some cleanup to do, but now that's the opening. You can see the cleanup in there. I'll come back later and clean it up. Thank you, Della. Yeah, the purple one's pretty too. It's equally as pretty. I think it just, it depends on your color. I know somebody said they didn't like red. So I made sure not to give you a red one. This time around, purple was the way to go. So now that's in. I'll come back later on and I'll clean the bag up offline. But that is the twist lock. So if you're with me, I'm on page 15 and I'm getting ready to, I will set this aside and I'm ready to do the exterior pocket. So I'm going to set this aside. That's already done. So for the exterior pocket, what you're going to need is you're going to need your zipper. And this is going to be your number 3 zipper. There will be some zipper ends. So in the directions, there are these little zipper tabs here, because what we want to do is, this is a zipper by the yard, which means that there is no ends. There's no stops. There's no metal stops or anything like that. And so what we want to do is make them look pretty on the end. And the way that we're going to do that is to sew these little zipper ends. If you have scrap vinyl, if you have scrap leather, purple. So she says purple is her favorite. It seems to be a fan favorite in the group. And I'm always like, without giving too much away, I don't want to say, hey guys, how do you feel about purple? Because then, somebody say, I love purple. And somebody say, I hate purple. But, with this box, I thought about everybody who was subscribing and how many times they had said, I love purple. So I said, purple was the way to go this month. So you're going to need your number 3 zipper, these tabs, and you should have 2 of them. I did not interface them, but these tabs will get added to the ends of the zipper over here. So I'll add 2 of them. When you cut them out, they will be one piece like this. And you're going to fold to the middle. You can draw a line, fold to the middle, iron it, and then if you open it up, you can fold the 2 short ends to the middle creased line. So I fold one in, iron it, and then fold the other one in. So then what will happen is you will have 2 finished or smooth ends, right? Because it's folded. And then we're going to take these and we're going to attach it to the ends of our zipper. So you want to make sure you cut the zipper to the length that it gives you in the direction, because when you add these zipper pieces, I'll show you. When you add the zipper pieces over here on the ends, it should come like right there. It should be ever so slightly a gap, but you want to make sure that you cut them to the directions, to the size, because you don't want your zipper to be too long because it'll hang off the edge and your other piece will be too small. So I'm going to put this, what happens is once I've done this, right in that center crease line that I did initially, I'm going to stick my zipper right into that line, just like that. And I will clip it in place to hold it. Another tip I always give is you can make this back piece about 1/8 of an inch longer than the front piece so that it hangs over, because when we're done, you're not going to see that, but you're guaranteed to get that back piece of fabric. So I'm going to clip one and clip the other one on the other side, just like that. And then I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew along the folded edge. And you can sew, if you're more comfortable, you can sew at 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to sew at 1/8 of an inch in from the edge, and I'm going to back tack. I know that it's longer, my pieces. I am going to trim it when I'm done. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine and do that. And I'll do them both at the same time, meaning while I'm here, not simultaneously. So I'm going to put this here. I will back tack. This is a nylon zipper, so be careful sewing over it. It can break a needle the same way a metal zipper can. So just take your time. Oh. And I'm leaving it at a stitch length of 4. Ran out of bobbin thread. So let's get another spool. And I'm just going to go back over that a little bit. It was at the end that it caught it. So I'll just go back over it a little bit. And this makes people nervous. I take my foot off of my pedal whenever I'm doing this, because I really don't want to accidentally press down on my pedal when I have my finger under here and catch my finger. So I always take my foot off the pedal. Okay, so that's one side, and I'm going to do the other side. And really try to get these straight. So you should have cut your zipper straight, and try to get them as straight as possible. Okay, so now we've done that. So the next step for us, I hope I didn't lose my sound. The next step is going to be to now start to construct our zipper. So I'm just going to cut these ends flush with my zipper so they're totally flush on both sides. And I am going to get my zipper pieces, and I should have 2 exterior and 2 lining pieces. And we're going to do what's known as a zipper sandwich. And I'll show you what that is. It's like, you know. Okay. So now that I have those, I then am going to take my pocket pieces that I cut out. Now, once again, your lining pieces are waterproof canvas, so they will not be interfaced. However, your exterior pieces should be interfaced. All right. So here goes my zipper, and I'm going to lay it in there. So these are interfaced, but these are not. Okay. I mark the center of my pieces by folding them in half. And then I take a scissor and I put a little snip in there, which is inside of my seam allowance. You can also use a marking tool or a pen to mark it, but I did that on all 4 of my pieces. When it comes to the zipper, I'm just going to use my chalk liner because I want to make sure my zipper is centered as well. So I'm just folding the ends that I just did. I'm using a chalk liner because I won't be able to see it if I do a pen. And I'm just going to mark, I just stick it right there on the inside for the center. And I stick it in there for the center. I'm going to take one of my lining pieces. I'm going to lay it right side up on my mat. Make sure that you match the bottom center and the top center. I'm then going to move my zipper and I'm going to align my zipper to that center mark. And my zipper is face down. So I actually know where it should be because I marked the center. I'm then going to add clips to this. You can use double-sided tape, which will help to keep it in place. And if you use double-sided tape, you don't need the clips. And I'm just measuring this again just to make sure I didn't go too far off. Okay. And double-sided tape is a preference. I will say I like using the 1/8 inch double-sided tape because it stays out of the seam allowance. 1/4 inch if you take a 3/8 inch or a 1/4 inch seam allowance, sometimes if it's not totally where it should be, you'll start to see it and then you have to start peeling it away. So right side up on your exterior, zipper is wrong side down. It doesn't matter which way it's opening right now because we're going to determine how you want it to open when we're done. So once I've done this, I'm going to go to the sewing machine. I'm going to baste stitch it in using a stitch length of 6 and a seam allowance of 6. And I'm going to just baste stitch it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So let's do that. Okay. What I will tell you is move your pull out of the way so that it can get as flat as possible on this edge here, and then just move it back in the opposite direction. Make sure if you have to lift your presser foot that your needle is still in the down position. Okay, so now we've added that in there. Once again, I baste stitched it in there. And the next thing we want to do is we want to grab one of our lining pieces. So this is our lining pieces. Remember I said to you that this waxy side is the wrong side and the fabric side is the right side. So with this right side up, we're going to take our lining piece also right side up. We're going to match the tops, clip it in place. And this is where the sandwich comes in, right? So if you imagine it's 2 slices of bread with a piece of meat in the middle, which is your zipper. That's how you get the little zipper sandwich. And then you can line up these center marks as well. Once again, I'm going to sew this with the waterproof canvas on the top because the fabric, this is smoother than the waterproof canvas. Now I'm going to actually stitch this in completely using a stitch length of 3 and 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I will be moving that pull out of the way. So you'll find that you move your pull forward and backward to get it out of the way from time to time. So now that is a little tighter. So my needle is down. I can lift my presser foot and then I can move it and then lower my presser foot. So just make sure that needle's down when you do that. All right. So now that's in. So if I fold this over, just like this, all right, you can see that that's 1/2 of my pocket. So now I'm going to do the same to the other side. So I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to grab my other exterior fabric right side up. And for this, I have to make sure that I turn it upside down, which is what I did before, right? So I'm going to turn it upside down and I'm going to align it with the top center, my mark that I made. I'm going to add clips. So it's still wrong side down your zipper. I'm going to also clip it on my sides here. I'm just going to clip that so it's all together, not fiddling it with it when I get to the sewing machine. All right. And then I'm going to go to the sewing machine. Once again, I'm going to base stitch it in at 1/4 of an inch. I'm sorry, at 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to base stitch that in. And the basting stitch, once again, I do it so that it's not in the seam allowance, so I don't have to come back and rip it out. So I just leave it right in there. I'm just moving my zipper out of the way. That's all I'm doing. Okay. So the last part of this, all right, so now we have those 3 pieces on there. All right. The last part of this is going to be to take our second lining piece, lay it down so that it's the right side against the right side of your waterproof canvas, or the right side of the lining against the right side of the fabric. We're going to clip that in place. And we will then go back and stitch it in at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So we're permanently putting the zipper in now. It was upside down. I admit it. It was the wrong side. It's hard to see it with black. Black is so hard to see, especially in the lighting that I have on this side. It looks good for you, but on me, it's a little bit dark. Okay. So these are right sides together. These are right sides together. I should have a lining, my zipper in between, and then the exterior. So I'm going to stitch this in 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and move your pull out of the way as you come to it. So as you come to that zipper pull, make sure to move it out of the way. All right, make sure your zipper is down. I just lifted that up. I mean, your needle is down. I lifted that up, but my needle is down. So just if you have to adjust, do that. Okay. So pocket's all done. Well, almost all done. The next thing we're going to have to do is open this up, or we're going to open this up. I'm going to close my zipper. You have some waterproof canvas, which is kind of stiff here, but I am going to iron on the fabric side. And I'm pulling these two pieces down away from my zipper, and I'm finger pressing it just like this, just to straighten out that line. I will use clips to make sure that I'm holding them in place. And then I will iron along this side. Once again, I'm ironing on the fabric, not the wrong side of the waterproof canvas, so it's okay. It will feel floppy at first once you're done ironing, but the waterproof canvas will stiffen up. It'll go back to its original, stiffness. Pulling these two, matching the corners and the sides. Matching the center bottoms, the center marks at the bottom. And then I will be doing the side as well. So there you go. And I'm just going to iron it because I want it a little bit, a little bit more flat. But that's what it should look like when you're done. So I'm just going to take an iron and put that over there real quickly. It's because I want it to be flat. I do have my zipper closed as well. And what I'm really trying to do is get the cotton to be a nice crisp. And then what we're going to do is we will be top stitching along this top. And the way that we're going to do that is I am not going to worry about top stitching to the end. I'm going to top stitch to the actual end of this piece right here. So if you're following along with me, I am on page I got there very quickly, didn't I? I'm on page 20. So what I'm going to do is when I stitch this, I'm going to stitch. So I'm on the exterior fabric. I'm going to stitch across. I'm going to stitch to the top of the zipper, this little tab over here, stitch to the top of that, come to this side, stitch back across to the top of it, right, the exterior part, stitch back to the other side and back around. So that's what I'm doing. I'm not stitching straight across both sides. I'm sort of making a long rectangle, but I'm using this. I am going to use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, which is why I tried to get it as flat as possible. And I am going to keep my zipper closed just to make sure that it does stay flat. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. I'll start down here, maybe about 1/2 an inch or so, 1/4 of an inch from the end. And I will back tack at the beginning and stitch length should be a 4 or 4.5, whichever one you want. It's a top stitch length is what I'm using. Okay. I can see when I'm about 1/8 of an inch for this piece here. Rotate your wheel, lift your presser foot, and then rotate your fabric. And then I'm just going to stitch across the end. If you want this part, you can do it 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't matter. I'm going to come back down the other side, 1/8 of an inch. I am pressing and holding to make sure that both the exterior and the waterproof canvas underneath are both flat. Now you may notice that, and I feel it, but there is some drag because remember I said you want the smooth material to the bed so it glides. Waterproof canvas has a little bit of grip, but there was no way I could do it without putting it to the bottom. So Make sure to keep your hardware out of the way. All right. So now we've done our pocket. Just checking the back. We've done our pocket. And we need to make sure that now we put in our magnetic closure. Because remember, on our bag on the back, there is a magnet. So over here, there is a magnet. So we want to make sure we get that in there. So we don't want to forget to do that. If you don't want to put the magnet, you can definitely leave it out. But I'm going to make it a slip pocket. And so I'm going to unclip this. I'm going to grab my magnet, and I will need 2 reinforcing pieces. And like I said, I used Decoville Heavy. You can use Decoville Light. You can use any number of things, vinyl, leather. And your magnet comes in 2 pieces. There's a male and a female piece. The female piece is the one that has a little dimple going in, and the male is the one that has the one protruding out. I'll let you figure that out. But on the actual line exterior for the pocket, I'm using the male piece. If you don't get this right, it's totally fine. You just need them to click together. I put the thicker one against the bag, which is why I put the female piece against the back. So I'm going to open this up. It will come with these 2 washers. They're metal washers. I don't know if you can see them. And then it comes with 2 pieces here that are clicking together. You can see that. So this one is the female and that one's the male. You can see it's got a little, but they're pronged on the back. So now you can decide, how do you want your zipper to open? You know, left to right, right to left. I want mine to open left to right. So I'm going to open this way. Trying to think of my bag. No, I want mine to open the other way. So I'm going to turn it around. Because inside my bag, I want my zipper to also open the same way. And I open my bag from right to left. So however you want it, it doesn't matter. So I'm then going to put the magnetic closure against this piece here. So I'm going to fold this over. So these 3 pieces are together and I only have one of these, right? Flip it to the back. Make sure it's centered. So you want to make sure it's centered on your cutting mat. And then we're going to measure up. And we're going to do this in a couple of steps because I need it to be very precise. So we're going to take our ruler and we're going to measure up and make a mark from my center, right? So I want to make sure it's on the center. And I measure up from my center. And I actually draw a line. So I'm going to draw a line right here. That's where my magnet's going to go. All right. Given that this is the center also, I'm going to draw a vertical line as well as a horizontal line. So I want to make sure I line the bottom up, and I'm going to draw a line like this. And this is a heat erasable marker. So that's my center. I'm going to take my piece of Decoville or reinforcement, and I'm going to lay it right over there, just like that. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to lay it over it, and then I'm going to fuse it in place. If you're using vinyl or leather, you don't have to fuse it in place. But this fuses, so I am going to fuse it. But like I said, for those, you don't really have to. So I'm going to do this, and I am going to... Now, remember that you have waterproof canvas up there, and it's actually the back side. So please keep your iron away from that. And then I'm going to remark this, and I am going to... I will remark this, and then I will cut the holes for the prongs. So let's say that was on there. So we will take one of our washers. So we'll grab one of these washers. because we're going to need that. We're going to once again mark the center. So line your center up, measure up. You'll have to draw a horizontal line and a vertical line, right? In the same spot. Mine went away because heat. And then I'm going to draw a horizontal line. So that should be my center. If you want to, you can measure left to right. And then you can measure the other way just to make sure that it's exactly in the center, right? So you can do this. And then you know it's the center. I'm going to take my washer, which is this piece right here. I'm going to put that little circle. There's a circle on the washer. Let's see if you see it. Right, that circle. I'm going to put it right in the center, or as close to the center as possible. And then when I lay the washer down, I'm not going to lay the washer so that the slits are vertical or horizontal. So I'm not going to lay them so they're like this or like that. I'm actually going to lay them so they're like at a 45-degree angle. And that just makes it harder to get them to, they won't pull out as easy as if they were this way. So I rotated about 45 degree, put that center mark right on that little bullseye right there. And then what I will do is I will make a line in those slits that I have. So when I'm done, that's what it'll look like. See the lines at a 45-degree angle. Now I need to cut these open. You can use a pair of scissors. Once again, this is on, just as a reminder, this is on the exterior of your bag. So it's not on the lining piece. So you can fold this just like this. Mine is stiff, but I can fold it like this, and then I can use a snip and snip a little hole. Try not to cut it too big. So we're just gonna do like this, snip a little hole. And you can always, once again, make the hole bigger. You can't make it smaller. And then I'm gonna cut over here as well. Just cut a little snip. All right. I'm gonna flip it over to the front. Remember I said this is going to be the male portion. So I'm going to get the male portion of my magnet. I'm going to insert it from the front or the lining or the exterior side to the back. And I just have to remember where my little holes are. So that the prongs come in through the back. So it's from front to back, just like that. Like I said, you can make the hole bigger. You can't make it smaller. And they will come through to the back, just like that. I'm then going to take my washer. I'm going to put that over those prongs, and then I'm going to bend them in towards the center. I always bend in towards the center, not out. So I hold it. Make sure when you're bending it, you start at the base, right? You don't want to start up here. You want to get it as close down to as possible. And you're going to bend it in. You can use your finger. These aren't very stiff, but you can use your finger. I'm just using this little tiny screwdriver. And then once you've done one side, you're going to do the other side as well. I'm going to bend it down. I'm then going to stick a piece of, I have Gorilla tape. You can use duct tape, but I do like the Gorilla tape, so that's what I will be using. It says Gorilla in there. And I'm just going to cut a piece of that off and stick it over those prongs. Just like that. And I've done the first part of the magnet. All right. So if you're following along with me, I'm now on page. What page am I on? I'm on page 22, going on to page 23. So I'm somewhere in the middle. The next thing we're going to do is we will now complete our pocket by sewing it together. So I'm going to take the right side. I'm putting this magnet piece to the side for right now because I don't need it. I'll need it in a few minutes, but I don't need it right now. Try to keep all my pieces together. I'm going to, there's two pieces over here, right? So these are the lining, and then you have the exterior. I'm going to fold the linings together, and I'm going to match them. I will also match the sides as well. I'm going to add clips here. Now I will not be sewing the bottom closed. And that's because when you sew a seam and you flip it out, you then have 4 layers of fabric. And so now if I do it with both of these, I will have 8 layers of fabric. I don't want that. I'm going to be sewing it into the base of my bag, so I don't have to worry about it. All right. And then you have this part. Some people fold it down. Some people fold it up. I fold it in towards the lining, these two pieces towards the lining. You can nest them, although it is a little bit hard. So I just make sure that I fold them towards the lining. So I put the seams up towards the exterior, and then everything else pushes down towards the lining. And then just match these other pieces, the exterior pieces, just match them up. And once again, these get pushed down towards the lining. You can also, if you want to, you can open up the seams if you wanted to, and you can do that as well. So if you wanted to open them up, you could. It's up to you. All right. So remember I said we're not going to sew the bottom. So all I need to do is sew down both sides. And I am going to sew them at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when I'm done, I should be able to stick my hand straight through. So if you can't stick your hand straight through, that means you have to open these up. So I'm going to sew both sides 1/4 inch, leave the bottom, top and bottom open. I'm using a stitch length of 3. So let's go back to the sewing machine. What I will say to you is you should clear your zipper ends because the zipper is shorter. You should clear those zipper ends. Okay. So if you did what I did, which is I did not open my zipper, that should be fine because guess what? You should be able to stick your hands in either side. So I'm going to stick my hand in here and open that zipper. I will come back here and in this corner where it is, I'm just going to cut it about a little bit more than 1/8 inch, but I want to cut it to reduce the bulk there. You don't have to, but I'm just going to cut like kind of like a V or U shape right there to get rid of some of that bulk. I don't know if you can see that. It's like a little curve. And I will do the same here. Do not cut through your stitches. If you think that you're going to cut through your stitches, then just leave it. This just helps reduce the bulk. So I open my zipper up. So my zipper is open. You should be able to stick your hand straight through. It's like a magic trick. If you cannot do that, then that means that you didn't, you sewed the bottom or the top. Open it up. Open up whichever side you opened. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip my exterior over my lining. Just like this. So I'm just pulling it and flipping it over the lining. Poke out that that zipper tab over here. Just poke that out. And then do the same on the other side. Just poke it out. I'm just going to grab my awl very quickly. Sometimes I use my screwdriver, and I just want to make sure I get this out of here. So it should be nice and, it should be nice and pointy. And like I said, if you trimmed it, it makes it better. And you can use a knitting needle or crochet hook or whatever to run along that. So I'm just grabbing my awl because it was right here. There we go. All right. So now it looks like a pouch, except for the bottom's open. But that is going to be our pocket. All right. So I can close this. I am going to straighten this out as straight as I can, lay it flat. I am going to clip the bottom. When I add clips to the bottom, I will base stitch it in at 1/8 of an inch. Once again, trying to keep all those pieces together. You should have your magnet right here. Right? So you should have the first part of your magnet in there centered. And then I'm just going to base stitch all these layers at the bottom. Remember I said if you sewed it all, you'd have this doubled, the lining doubled, the next one, and it would all create this immense amount of bulk. And I don't want that. And it won't matter because we're not going to see it. So I will base stitch that, stitch length of a 6 at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so who's ready to put together our exterior? We're in the home stretch, I promise you. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to set this aside. So we have our flap, we have our straps, we have our tabs. We're going to set that aside. And then what we're going to need next is we're going to need our little kind of T-piece that we had earlier. So we're going to need this piece. And we will need the accent pieces that we did our fold on, right over here. So we're going to need those pieces. If you're following along with me in the directions, I am on page, drum roll please. I'm on page 24. So these are the pieces we're going to need. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to prepare our back with the extra magnetic piece on it. And that piece should match. So we're going to need these. We're just going to set these pieces aside and just get the one that's your back. This one happens to be the back because it has that little logo for me. All right. Double check that wherever you fold it, this is the right side up, right? So this should be, if it was a happy face, the eyes would be up here and the smile would be down there. All right. We're going to take this and we're going to attach it to the back, right? But we need to make sure that the magnets line up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the center of the bottom of this, not the top where the fold is, but the bottom. And I'm going to fold it in half and I'm going to take a little snip. We're going to repeat the magnet install the same way we did for the pocket. So I will center my piece on one of my center lines. Right, so I'm centering it on my center line. Going to take my ruler. I'm going to make a mark or a line horizontally and vertically. So this is vertical. Measure up however far I need it. And of course, I didn't do it evenly. So I actually came down here. That was me. It's right here. All right, so that's my center mark. Really what will happen is when I lay this on here and I align it centered, that center mark here should align with this little nubby part that's sitting out. You're going to grab your other piece of your reinforcement, your little washer, and this. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take this, lay it glue side down. I will iron it in place. I just try to get it in the center because I want to make sure that it's even in there. I don't want it more to one side than the other. I try to get it balanced. Okay. Once I've done that, I'm then going to take my washer. Oh, well, I'm going to measure the center again. So I'm going to go up and across one more time. So vertically and horizontally, put it on the center line. You kind of know where you should be by now because the Decoville heavy or whatever you're using is there. So I'm just going to mark this. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to mark up and across. And then to double check, once again, you can measure in from the left and the right. So you can measure from the right side and the left side and make sure that it's centered. I'm then going to take my washer. Remember to put those little slits at 45-degree angles. And I'm going to put the center line right on that little crosshatch that's there. And then I will draw my little lines. I will grab my scissor. See the little lines there? I'm going to fold it in half on the line so it'll be at a little bit of an angle. And I will add a little snip. I will then take the female part of my magnet and I will stick it through the holes that I've created from the exterior side to the wrong side. So from the right side of the exterior to the wrong side. I will then take my washer, put it over the prongs just like that, and I will bend them in. So let me get my screwdriver. And I will bend those prongs right in. I will get a piece of Gorilla Tape also, and I will add that right on the top of this. So get that, and I'll press it in. Now, if you did that right and your measurements are correct, you should be able to take your pocket with the magnet and your exterior, and you should be able to lock them together. And the bottom pieces at the bottom here should line up. And you can see mine lines up at the bottom. Right, and they're clicked in right there. So as long as you did the measurements right, that's what you'll get. You're going to make sure that you sew this with the center mark of your back and the notch that you made on your pocket bottom. So then it's totally straight and totally centered. So I'm just going to add a clip there. For my own sanity, I'm going to go and baste this again. So I'm going to baste it again at 1/8 of an inch so that all those pieces are together. I still have it at a stitch length of 6, so I'm basting it in, and I will back tack 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Next step is to put everything together. So let's do that. Bring back those other pieces that we had before. We have our center bottom piece. Fold it in half and line up these corners and put a mark and put a mark. And then do the same for the sides. Okay. And then do the same for these pieces. They should measure the same thing, but I like to center mark everything. So what we will do is we'll take a piece that's the easiest and not as bulky. You're going to take your exterior front. This is right side up. So your bottom is right side up. And you're going to lay the exterior right side down so that these are right sides together, just like that. And we're going to clip them in place. Line up your centers. All right. And then we're going to sew this across. 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So we're not going to be basting it. We're going to actually sew it across at a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If you're following me in the directions, I may be doing it a little bit out of sequence, but I am on page 27. So I'm going to sew this here. My stitch length is a 3. And we're going to sew this right in. Back tack. All right, we've done one. And then I'll just, I'll explain the rest. We're just going to take a side piece now, and we're going to do the same thing. Line up the centers. And we're going to do this all the way around. So I'll do that. And then we'll do the same. When we come back, we'll do the same with the pocket. And then we'll do the same with the other side as well. So I'll do that. I probably won't be talking. I'll just be sewing, but that's what I'm doing. So this is the side. Okay, so now you have all your pieces together, right? So all the pieces are together now. And this is what it should look like. Looks a little crazy. So the next step for us is going to be to attach the foam. So I've gone past page 28 and I'm on page 29, which is attaching the foam. So if you remembered, I said, don't attach your foam, don't cut your foam. So I have one big piece of foam right here. And my piece should fit on my foam. I know it looks like it's not going to, but that's because it's turned the wrong way. There you go. It's my foam. So my pocket is up here, and this is the bottom. So the next thing we're going to do is you can draw a line around, and I'm just going to open this up. Draw a line around the foam, so now you know how to cut it. If you cut it out ahead of time, it may be that when you cut it out, it's actually too small. It's better too big than too small. But once we draw the line around it, at least we will know where it's going to be. I normally attach things to a bigger piece of foam than I do to a smaller piece of foam. So before I do that, I want to work on this back pocket piece. So make sure you have plenty of foam, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch down this back pocket piece. But what I need to do is let go of the magnet, do it like this, and I'm going to stitch across, entirely across on the actual exterior fabric, and it's above the pocket. So what'll happen here is your exterior should roll down. So it should be create like a little lip there, and I'm going to sew straight across there. But I want to make sure that I have this laid out in such a way that when I stitch it, I still have enough. So I have plenty of foam here. So I'm going to take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch that at 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to come back later on and flip this up like that. And then I'll be able to sew around it. But there's a reason why I'm doing this. And that's because I want to make sure that I don't have a lot of bulk. And if I stitch this down now here, when I come and stitch these pieces, these are going to get stitched across. I will not be stitching totally across this when I flip this up. What I will be doing is I will already have the top stitch locking this down, and I will only stop and start at the end of the pocket. So I hope that makes sense. So I don't want to have to stitch across all of this bulk. So I'm folding this down like that. I am going to stitch this across just like that. So I'm going to stitch across this with the pocket down. So make sure your pocket's down. That way, when I flip this up and I come back to top stitch these pieces here, right? I can then start at a corner, go around, come all the way around the back, up the other side, and then stop here at the corner. I will not be top stitching across this pocket because it's bulky. So I won't be doing that. All right. So before I do that, I'm going to give this a good iron. I want to make sure when I iron it, I'm pushing the seam allowance to the top or towards the exterior fabric. I'm not folding it under this way. It's very hard to push it down, so it naturally falls that way. So I'm going to go to the ironing board, and all these pieces, I'm going to iron it so that the seam allowance is towards the top. So let's do that. I just want it to be nice and crisp, and then we're going to cut it out, and then we're going to, so this is really the home stretch. I don't have to worry about the waterproof canvas because it should be right side. This should be the right side of the waterproof canvas. So just make sure you're not curling it under in any way. Once again, make sure that the seam allowance is going towards the top or of your bag, not towards the bottom. It'll be hard to fold it down because of the waterproof canvas. So that's how you'll know you're doing it wrong. All right. So let's go back and stitch this down. So I'm going to get my foam again. My foam, get my piece, lay it on there, just like that. I am going to flip this piece down, just like that. And if you're following along, take a look at page 30 to understand what I'm doing. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this in place. There was a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. I'm going to stitch back over that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So it'll be a lot of stuff under that sewing machine, but we can get it done. Just make sure you leave enough room on either side of your piece. Yep, I'm sticking that foam right under there. You can trim it. You could have trimmed it, but I like leaving it. All right. the whole pocket is flipped down. I'm just going to tack down on that 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew it to the foam. Just keep it in place. Okay. Looked harder than it was, but I promise you it's easy. So now this is on here. Okay, so it's on there. So now you can open up all your pieces. Now we can draw our line, so we can come back with our little pen. And we can draw our line all the way around. Oh, that's lifting. So I'm going to use a ruler and a pen and just draw the line. And I'm drawing the line, by the way, with the top folded because the foam has to fit underneath that, right? So I want to make sure that the top is folded. Line my foam here. All right, so that was one side. I'm going to draw along the bottom. And this is just giving us a guideline. I'm going to cut it just a tad bigger, but it's giving us a guideline so I don't have to take all of this foam back to the sewing machine. Okay, so when you're done, I don't know if you can see it, I have lines going all the way around. So now what I can do is take my scissor, all right, and I can cut out that little T shape, and I'm giving myself about 1/4 inch all the way around, and that's to give me some wiggle room. So I'm cutting out all those pieces, giving myself about 1/4 inch all the way around. And I drew the line so that when I go to the sewing machine and I'm sewing it, I know where to place this on that line so then it comes out straight. That's why I drew the line. So if you're asking, why did she draw that line? Because then I know that it's straight. Without the line, it's very easy to get a piece to shift ever so slightly, and then your bag come out wonky. So that's why I drew that line. Once again, it's about 1/4 inch around extra that I'm cutting, and then I'll come back and trim it once I'm done. I'll come back and trim it to the line or to the piece. Yes, you can use a rotary cutter for this and a ruler. Okay. The other thing is by doing this, I can also clip it. If I left all that foam on there, I can't clip it. So I'm going to clip it around the entire piece. Now, when you're sewing this down, make doubly sure that those folded pieces are not folded because you don't want to fold so this is folded down. You want to take this folded piece and flatten it like this. So you want to make sure when you stitch it, you're actually stitching it fully down. You're not stitching it with it folded because then later on we're going to have a problem. So just, you'll have to unpick it, I guess. And I have one more side. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my clips. Okay, you can close your, leave your pocket open. I want it flat. Grab your clips and just clip them. Make sure that you unfold these bottom pieces so that they're flat. Remember, you marked it where it should fold under the foam. So we're going to cut to that line when we're done. But just clip it all the way around because we're going to base stitch this down is what we're going to do. And I just need to iron this a little bit because you can't see it, but I can see it. For some reason, this didn't get the interfacing. It's not to the edge, it rolled up. So I just want to make sure I get that down. Okay. And then we're going to base stitch at a stitch length of 6. So it'll be super quick. And 1/8 of an inch. Don't worry too much. If you go off and you didn't catch the edge, that's okay. We're just really, what we're doing with base stitching is we're just tacking it down. We're just going to make sure it's tacked down. And you'll see, like, as you start clipping this in place, you'll see things shift, and then you'll understand why I drew those lines. I also did not do separate pieces of foam on this because I didn't want to have bulk in the entire bag throughout. This is just one amount of bulk of this foam. If I did it on separate pieces, I'd have bulk all over the bag, and I did not want that. So that was the reason why I didn't do it that way. Okay, almost done. Remember to keep those tops of your bag unfolded. So now what I'm going to do is I will go to the sewing machine and I will base stitch all the way around this. I'll just do L's. So I'll start here, go down, go to the end here, cut my thread. Do the same on this side, cut my thread. The reason that I'm doing that is because I do not want, I'm going to have to cut the top here where that line is, where my foam is on the fold. Maybe what we should do is do it now. Just cut it so it stops. So I'm just cutting, I folded it under and I'm just cutting those top lines so that this piece of foam should tuck right underneath that. So I'll do that all the way around. And you should have drawn a line across the top. I don't know if you could see my line, but I drew a line across the top there. You can kind of see it right there. So I'm just going to cut that off because that's really where my foam is going to be inside that fold. So I'll cut those off too. It's one less thing to worry about. And then unfold it and then clip it back. If you didn't do that, just fold it, draw a line, pull it back, and then cut it. So if you didn't draw the line, you can come back in, draw the line like this. Oh, this piece isn't straight. I can see my piece wasn't straight. Do this, draw the line, and then come back in and just cut it. But make sure it's folded when you draw the line, because that's what you really want, that excess foam to come off. Just making sure I got them all. Great. You do not, like I said, you're just going to do L's. So you're going to do a bunch of little L's. It should be about 4 L's across the entire piece, because you're not going to sew across the top. You're just going to sew down the sides, and it'll be a little L and an L shape. Make sure your pocket is flipped down. Mine is flipped down. So we're just going to sew down here across, from this side down to the bottom. Same thing. So little L's. There should be 4 of them. So let's go to the sewing machine and base this in. My stitch length should be at a 6, unfolding the top, 1/8 of an inch. Keep an eye on those lines that you drew. Make sure that you're staying within them. Okay, so now I've done that. I'm just going to trim it down. I'm going to use my rotary cutter and my ruler. And I'm just going to cut it down. Make sure, once again, that these are unfolded. The foam should fit under there, so you should be able to wrap that right over the foam. I'm just going to, like I said, use my rotary cutter and my ruler just to trim this down very quickly. So all I'm doing is cutting off the extra foam. And then what we're going to do next is we will be putting this all together. And you'll see how it very nicely collapses in on itself. It should be basted in, so it shouldn't be a problem cutting it, cutting these pieces off, because they are basted in. So, and the way that we're going to do this, just to give you a heads up, the way that we're going to do this is we're going to top stitch along these edges. But when we top stitch, we're not going to cut the thread when we get to the end. We're just going to continue to the next piece. So you'll see what I mean. And then it pulls it in very nicely. It also helps to line up the accent piece when you're done. Okay. There we go. So you should have trimmed everything up. So everything should be trimmed up and it should be perfect. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to top stitch. So You're going to take your pocket piece and you're going to flip it up. So you shouldn't have any problems doing this because we actually stitched it down here, right? So we should be able to do this and push the magnets together and they should stay. What you will find though is when you push the pocket up, you will find that there is a little bit of a lip here. That's totally fine. The way, remember I said that we're going to sew it, is we're going to start at one end, go all the way around and stop at the other end. Before we do that, I am going to stitch this pocket down. So make sure that it's pressed down. And we're going to start at either the top or the bottom. And you're going to stitch down and back tack and do the same on the other side. So we're just going to stitch this down on the side because right now it's open. So I am going to attach it to this foam piece and then we'll do the top stitching. And like I said, we're in the home stretch. So let's go to the sewing machine and stitch that down on either side. I'm going to start at the top. Remember, it is bulky. I'm going to take 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you're going to put your phone in here, you may want to try your phone and maybe you want to do 1/8 inch. On the pattern, I did 1/8 inch, but you can do whatever size you want. Like I said, try your phone in there if that's what you're going to do, or a pair of sunglasses, and you're going to stitch that in. So back tack at the top and the bottom. I'm going to put my needle down because it is so thick and then drop my presser foot. I'm going to stitch forward, backwards, and I'll do this a couple of times. By the way, if I didn't mention it, you should be using a stitch length of 4. I use my basting stitch, so I'm going to just very quickly take that out because I do not want the basting stitch. I want a regular stitch. So I'm going to take out my basting stitch out of here. Kind of wondering why it was getting to the bottom so quickly. Okay, so I use a top stitch because it is so thick. I want it to be able to get in there without breaking a needle. I did buy the bigger, on my Juki 2010, I did purchase the larger opening because my machine did not come with it. And I don't know if you've noticed, I haven't been breaking needles. And I say that, knock wood, I haven't been breaking needles, so it seems to work very well. It did not come with directions, so I created a video if anybody buys the plate with the bigger hole, because it didn't, like I said, it didn't come with instructions, so it was sort of trying to figure out how to get it in there. Okay, let's try this one more time. By the way, make sure that the distance on either side is even so your pocket is straight in the back. And we'll try this one more time. Stitch length is a 4. Dropping my needle first. Okay, so that's one side, and then I'll do the other side as well. And I'm trying to start right in the seam down there of where this meets, and that's because I'm using blue thread and I don't really want to see the blue thread. So if you have a rivet press, you can absolutely put a rivet at the top right here. If you have a rivet press, you can do that. So I'm going to go back here because for some reason, I think my thread broke. Okay. 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 All right. So now let's go and do what I said we're going to do. I'm going to start over here at this corner and I'm going to go straight. I'm going to back tack. When I get to the sewing machine, oh, yeah, let me know how you like it. Let me know how I didn't think it didn't really look much bigger, but it's ever so slightly bigger so that your needle does not hit that plate. So like I said, I have a video on how to install it. So if you want to take a look at that, let me know also when you sew with it, how you like it. I actually love it. So it's it was a good investment. So when we sew this together, I'm going to start at the bottom here. And what I'm doing is I'm top stitching. So I want to stitch on the exterior fabric on all my pieces at 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to sew it from the top. So you should sew it from the top because we're not quite putting it together yet. When I get to the end here on the sewing machine, I'm just going to take this piece, push it right underneath, just like that. Push it right underneath the presser foot and keep sewing. When I get to this piece, I'm going to push it right up against that and keep sewing. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to create this connecting thread. And when we put our pieces together like this and we line up those accent pieces on the side, that connecting thread is going to help us align all of these bottoms so you won't have like one that's higher than the other. So let's take a look at how I do that. So I'm going to start at the bottom. And once again, just to mention, I start here, but I stop there. I don't sew across this whole thing. I start here, stop there. So let's go. I'm going to stick this under here. I am sewing on the exterior fabric at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. A stitch length of 4. It's a top stitch. Back tack at the start and the stop. So hold on. All right, here we go. So this is the part I was talking about. I didn't cut the thread. I'm just going to take this piece. On the exterior fabric, I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch top stitch going across that bottom piece. I'm then going to take this other piece. This happens to be my front piece. And I'm going to tuck it right underneath there. Once again, continue to stitch on the exterior fabric. Okay, I'm doing the same with the side. Oops. And I don't know if you heard it cut my thread. And then this is going to be the back because this is where my pocket is. I'm just going to rotate it right in there, stick it right underneath the presser foot. And this is where I only go to the edge. I don't go all the way across the pocket. I just get enough in and then I back tack. Okay. So it's going to look like a hot mess. I'll show you. That's what it looks like. It's a hot mess. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew up the side. So I'm going to push this down. Try not to break that thread so that it's inside out and right sides together. Just like that. And you can see that thread that's right here is carrying from here to there, which is really our bottom accent. So poke out those corners. You're going to fold it on itself, align the top. So I'm using the side and my front. I'm aligning the tops over here, and I'm going to clip them in place. I'm going to align these seams. Now those seams should, if you got it even, those seams should be the bottom accent piece seams that are in here. So you're going to align that right there. You should be able to feel it. And you'll get a peak at the bottom over here. See, it's a little peak. That's the way it's supposed to be. And we're going to clip it. We're going to do that on the sides. Either side of the side, continue clipping the bag. So I'm going to do this side. This is my pocket. And I can feel. So the box corners were already created for you. So that's really what I did here, is I created that box corner. Remember to unfold your top pieces because they should be sewn unfolded, not folded. And we're going to sew these 4 side seams. And make sure you get that line as straight as possible. That's very important as well. Hey, Miss Varner. You're never late to the party. We just may have had a couple more drinks than you did by now, but you're never late. Okay, I'm just clipping this. I'm pulling this out, make sure it's straight. Okay, so that's your bag. I'm going to go to all of these sides and I'm going to sew them down with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You can start at the top or the bottom. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that you keep these where the string is, make sure you keep them attached. And for some reason, one of my sides is wonky, but that's okay. Stitch length is going to be a 3. If you're having problems with 3, use a 3.5 or a 4. It's fine. And make sure to back tack. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that that's done, this was the home stretch. That's what it looks like, right? So now we can actually stick our hand in there, turn it right side out, check your seams, turn it right side out. Push your bag bottom out. And you should see that that little thread that was carrying from one to the other should have helped you align your bottom accent pieces. So I don't know if you can see that. See that? And that was because right here, that's because the thread that I carried across helped me align it. But I did the bottom for you, the bottom corner. So just poke out those corners, and you should get a square corner. Okay, so that's what it looks like. So what we're going to need to do next is attach that swivel, and we'll do that tomorrow. Really quick at the beginning, we'll attach the piece that goes here. But what we'll need to do is attach this and then attach that. That's just going to be a prong, so we can attach that tomorrow first thing. But that's what your bag will look like. Well, yours will be purple. But this will go on here, and then we'll just measure down and put the closure on. All right, and that's what it'll look like. So this is the blue version of the purple version. But you can see that we put that pocket on the back with the slip pocket with the magnetic closure. This is going to fold under just like that. And when the flap goes in here, it'll look like that. So it'll be very, very pretty. And then my phone does fit in here. So it's kind of snug, but it fits in here. My phone's pretty big, but I can slide it right in there. I can put a pair of sunglasses or keys back here. All right, so I did it a different color, but that's really what we've done tonight. I know it was a lot. There was a lot of explaining of the directions and everything like that. And I wanted to make sure you understood, especially when we were constructing that exterior pocket, because it was kind of fiddly when it came to how to attach it to the foam itself. So tomorrow we will pick up on page, or for day 3, I should say. We're going to pick up on page 32. On page 32, and we will attach our front twist part for this. We will finish up by attaching our D-rings to the side, or our rectangular rings, and then we'll construct the lining. So the lining has no internal pockets on it, so it's really just putting it together. And the lining, just to let you know, give you a peek of what that looks like for tomorrow, for anybody who is going to be joining me. This will be a zipper closure. So there is a zipper closure on the inside of the bag. The lining itself is one piece. So we will be attaching these little accent pieces with a zipper in the middle to this one piece. So it's a large piece that you're going to cut. And then we will then just, once we've done all of that, the lining, like I said, will be simpler than the exterior. If you want to put a slip pocket in yours, you absolutely can. But once we've done the accent pieces to it and we've constructed the zipper closure, we will then drop it into our bag, sew it all together, put on our zipper end, attach our straps, and we will be done. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm hoping to see everybody's bag. If you bought the pattern and you're doing a different material, let me see that as well. I'd love to see it in different materials. Last night, Nancy asked, could you do it in vinyl and leather? And once again, I said it earlier, you absolutely can. And I'd love to see this bag in other material as well. Have a great night, everybody. Please get some rest. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. For me, it's 10:07 p.m. So I've been talking for a little while. And if it's a little earlier for you because you're on a different coast, then enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good one. Bye-bye.